A Heroine's Beginning, Chapter 10. A year later. The twigs beneath my feet snapped as I walked over them. The forest path was beautiful and bright this morning, the leaves a vibrant green, letting in just enough light to illuminate the lane an emerald color. The flowers in my hand were freshly plucked from the field, and their scent wandered up to my nose, the smell sweet and fresh. I had walked down this road at least once a week for the past year, to her grave. The pain of her passing had softened slightly to a memory, but it never truly left. Small things would remind me of her. Her handkerchief found at the bottom of the laundry pile, still with her initials sewn into it. Her bottle of perfume that she only ever wore on special occasions, still sat on Father's bedside table. And when I would cook hazelnut soup, her favorite. The little ones would cry out for her in the night, when they had bad dreams. I would go to them and sing them back to sleep, but I knew it was not as comforting to them as she would be. I grieved in my own way. As the now oldest woman in the house, many of her responsibilities fell to me. Father tried to help, but we desperately needed the money that his labor brought in, now with us out of work. So he and Alexander went back to working in the fields shortly after her passing. It also meant that we no longer had to endure his awful attempts at cooking. My father is good at harvesting food, not preparing it. I became the resident cook, cleaner, mender, shopper, fetcher, and carer for the house. I mainly did the jobs I did at the manor house, but for no pay. I missed my mother, but barely had any time to grieve. I was so busy doing everything else. And so once a week, on my way to market, I would walk the long way around, via the fields on the edge of the forest, to collect some flowers, and then down the woodland path to the graveyard. There, amongst the headstones and the mausoleums, I would find Mother's little wooden cross, and the words, Hannah Brown, beloved wife and mother, etched into the wood. I set down my flowers, and picked up the ones I had left the previous week, which were now dying themselves. My hand found its way to the top of the cross, which I held on to. I then began my little speech. It had become a sort of tradition of mine, to recount all the previous week's events to my mother, as if she were listening attentively. Every week I would tell her about how tall Daniel was becoming, or how long Gwen's hair was now getting. I would tell her how Tom lost his last baby tooth, or how Clara had begun her courses. I told her about Richard's newest game idea that he came up with after hours of hard thinking, and about Robbie's ability to read longer words. I would talk to her as though she were not gone, but simply absent for a while from our lives, and she was going to return soon, so she should know everything that went on. After I finished my tales, I leant forward and kissed the top of the cross. I knelt backwards and pulled myself up off the ground and walked away, back down the woodland path with my basket in hand. I walked slowly down the path, taking in the fresh air and the sense of life radiating from the forest. There were always insects buzzing, birds flying, squirrels climbing, and the leaves were brimming with life. I found it uplifting after visiting the graveyard every week. I wandered along the path for a while, until I heard footsteps coming behind me. I stopped and let the source of the sound catch up with me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of gold as Ella walked alongside me. As we walked together, we chatted along the way as old friends do, my mind wandering to the events of the past year. After myself and the other staff were dismissed, Lady Kingston and her daughters had discovered that living without servants was not entirely to their taste. It turned out that Lady Kingston was a terrible cook, and Lady Anna could not possibly dirty her fine dresses with flour and eggs. Lady Jacqueline could occasionally muster up the energy to help with boiling water, chopping vegetables, and other tasks that did not require much skill. This lack of talent in the Kingston family meant that Ella, being the kind soul that she was, had volunteered to do most of the cooking. Her ladyship had told her that keeping busy would help ease the pain of her father's passing, and so kept finding more tasks to burden her with. One of those tasks was to get rid of the bed that had been dismantled on the day before Sir Henry died. Ella's stepmother had deemed it far too old and unfashionable to be seen in her house. This had the unfortunate effect of making Ella's temporary move to the servants' quarters permanent. The more days passed, the more she was treated like a servant, until one day, about 6 months ago, she had refused to do any chores. The consequences she had to endure for her misbehavior ensured that she never disobeyed her stepmother again. She had become her stepfamily's slave. She got no pay, no time off, and no chance of freedom. Her father's will made it so that Lady Kingston was her legal guardian until she married. Her one respite was when she was sent to the market to purchase supplies. We met frequently on this path, both missing parents, who would have been here if not for the fever, and both of us wishing for the life we had before that dreadful day. We walked in friendly conversation toward the marketplace in the center of the village. It was always busy this time of day, so we made an effort to stay close to each other. As we walked past the stalls showing fine fabrics and lace, I would always try to do my best Lady Anna impression. "Oh, but I must have that on my dress. Cinders, come here now and stitch it on." I spoke in a high, strained voice. "But, lady, there is no space left on your dress to stitch it onto," Ella replied. Even her angel-like manners had its limits when it came to her stepfamily. "Your hideous dress is maybe the most expensive one in existence, and there is no possible way of adding any more fabric or jewels." I found it amusing that even in her financial troubles, Lady Anna still had enough money to buy endless amounts of jewels, lace, and dresses. Even though I wished to go back and work at the manor like before, I knew I could never work under them again. I knew I would end up breaking one of Lady Anna's many tiaras, or accidentally dropping her horrid attempt at needlework into the fire, for crimes against basic art, or replacing one of Lady Kingston's bottles of perfume with a substance that would turn even the strongest stomach. I had occasionally asked Ella if she would try any of these amazing ideas, but she was too kind-hearted for her own good. We continued shopping, slowly filling our baskets with food. We talked as we shopped, and we shopped as we talked. We only got to see each other once a week, so we made the most of it. We were so engrossed in our conversation that we didn't notice that a crowd was gathering. It was only when our way to the next stall was blocked that we looked up and saw a man wearing a herald's uniform. He cleared his throat and unraveled a scroll. He nodded to the man standing next to him, who hit a large stick on the ground several times, and a quiet descended over the crowd. Ella and I looked at each other, wondering what was going on. The herald cleared his throat, and then a loud voice shouted over the crowd. Hear ye, he began. "As requested by our lord the Duke, in honor of his son and heirs coming of age, there will be held a ball, 10 days hence, at the Duke's palace, where every noble or common eligible person is invited to attend." A collective gasp went around the crowd. "An eligible person must be at least 18 years of age and must wear suitably fashionable attire." A groan went out over the crowd. In order to afford a dress like that, you would have to be high-born. This was the way for the Duke to appease the people, yet still keep his party selective. I raised an eyebrow at Ella. No doubt that Lady Evil and Lady Idiot would be attending. "The ball will begin at 8 sharp, he continued. "Details can be found here. The Duke hopes to see you there." He closed his scroll and nodded to the man next to him again, who took a piece of parchment out of his bag and began to nail it to the nearest post. The crowd swarmed around the piece of parchment, even though I knew many of them couldn't read. Ella and I began to walk in the other direction, trying not to get trampled. I saw the herald climb onto his waiting horse and ride off to the next village. He looked tired, even though it was still morning. I guessed the invitation was going out to all the villages in the Duke's county, which was a fair few. "What do you think it would be like?" Ella asked me, staring off into the distance. "I imagine magical," I replied. "I think that when you walk into the ballroom, you're frozen as your true love stands in front of you, begging you to dance," I exclaimed dramatically, sighing as I elbowed her lightly, smiling. As much as I liked Ella, She was far too easy to tease. It took her a minute to work out that I was joking. She laughed back at me. "Be serious," she said. "Mother and Father attended many balls, but I was always too young to go. Father met Mother at a ball years ago." She sighed, thinking about her parents. I thought for a moment and then said, "I think it would be wonderful. The dresses, the music, the very atmosphere of love. It would be incredible." I tried to stop thinking about something that could never happen, but my imagination had already taken over my rational thought. I was picturing the room, aglow with thousands of candles, the orchestra playing beautifully, the swirling gowns and delicious food. There would be a handsome young man who asked me to dance, and who would sweep me off my feet for a night. I wouldn't have to think or worry about my siblings or father for a few hours. Beside me, Ella sighed again. We had reached the edge of the village now, and were about to enter the wood. I wish I could go. "Well, why not?" I asked her. "You have more right than those three to go. You're a lifetime resident of these parts, and you should be lady of the manor. Also, I thought you still had a trunk of your mother's old dresses hidden." She nodded thoughtfully, but then shook her head. "No, they would see me there and order me back home. The proclamation said every eligible maid. She should have no right to bar you from attending." She thought about this and did not reply. "I wish I could attend, but I will never be able to afford a dress," I said sadly. She remained silent for a while, and when she did not try to speak again, I stopped and placed down my basket. "My lady," I said, offering my hand to her. "Would you care to join me in this dance?" I said in a mock male voice. She laughed and took it, placing down her own basket. "Why, of course, my handsome sir." I started to hum a simple tune as we attempted to dance hand in hand. However, I had never actually been taught how to dance, and this attempt at grace and poise failed miserably. I had no clue what I was doing. Ella tried to tell me the next steps as we went along, which only ended in hilarity and embarrassment. The tune came to an end, and we burst out laughing. It was maybe a good thing I was not planning to attend, as I could not dance. We picked up our baskets and parted ways. Ella went to tell her stepfamily the news of the ball, and I walked back home, where there was dinner that needed to be made.